And Navy Federal has a disparity between the black applicants applying for conventional loans and white applicants applying for loans. That disparity is as large as nearly 30%, right? I want to touch on this because this topic right here has caused a lot of controversy. A lot of people are up in arms. I want to unpack it though. And in the comments, guys, let me know your thoughts as you're hearing this, as you're reading the article. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know who's responsible, who's at fault, what can we do. So let's jump right into it, right? The nation's largest credit union rejected more than half of its black conventional mortgage applicants. Now, if you guys remember, about a year ago, I did a video about Wells Fargo being in a similar situation. Instead of the conventional loan applications, Wells Fargo got in trouble because a lot of people, a lot of black folk, were trying to refinance their homes and they were not able to refinance their homes. And this was around, I believe, COVID, like peak COVID, when interest rates were actually very low. And a lot of black applicants were getting a lot of resistance when they were trying to refinance their properties to lower their interest rates compared to other races, right? Wells Fargo got in trouble with the FTC, CFPB, right? All of the major regulators started to put a lot of pressure on Wells Fargo. And, you know, people already had like a love-hate relationship with Wells Fargo anyway. But what about Navy Federal? What about Navy Federal? Because Navy Federal, they're on the opposite end. Number one, they're a credit union. And most people already love credit unions over traditional banks anyway. But what's going on? Why is it this beloved credit union getting so much flack? Let's look into this, right? So let's go down. You can see it says Navy Fed, which lends to military service members and veterans, approved more than 75% of the white borrowers who applied for a new conventional home mortgage in 2022, right? The statistics and the data is coming from 2022. And I remember the type of YouTube content that we were seeing about Navy Federal back then. According to the most recent data available from the CFPB, but less than 50% of the black borrowers who applied for this same type of loans were approved. This right here. Notably, Navy Federal approved a slightly higher percentage of applicants from white borrowers making less than $62,000 than it did black borrowers making $140,000 or more. So this data point right here is crazy because what it's saying is if you are a white borrower and you're trying to get a conventional loan through Navy Federal and you're making about $60K and below, you have a better chance of getting a home loan approval versus a black applicant who's making over double the income than you. The advantage goes to the white borrower. This disparity has been a trend among credit unions and banks for a very long time, and it's not only impacting Navy Federal. Let's scroll down, and I'm going to give you this guy's story in a second, but let's go down and let's look at the statistics here. So you can see the approval rates: white 77, Asian 69, Native American 64, Latino 56, blacks 48. Based off the 2022 data, you can see here that Navy Federal Credit Union, the most beloved credit union and financial institution, they have the largest disparity in approvals, even over Wells Fargo, right? You can see Wells Fargo, JP Morgan Chase, Rocket Mortgage, Bank of America, right? Now think about that for a second, how much hate Wells Fargo typically gets. And right above it, Navy Federal is doing worse when it comes to this particular case. So now you have this gentleman here. He is a six-figure entrepreneur. I believe he has his own business. And he wanted to move into a new home, right, to be closer to his child's high school. The home, I think they have a picture of it right here, is right here, right? So this is an older man. He's making over six figures. Now, I don't know the specific data about this gentleman in this case study. I don't know what his DTI was. I don't know what his on-hand cash reserves was. I don't know his specific situation, but this gentleman wanted to move into this house and he went to Navy Federal. Now, as you know, when you're trying to do the home buying process, that process is a lot different than when you're trying to apply for a credit card. When you're trying to buy a home, you got to get your pre-qualification letter. You got to submit your tax documents. You got to submit a whole lot of information before the bank not only gives you the pre-qual letter, they're going to give you a pre-approval letter. You take that pre-approval letter along with your realtor, you submit the contract for a home, you're under contract. In this particular situation, this gentleman who was trying to buy this house, he was 2 weeks away. He was 2 weeks away from closing. Now, mind you, this is after when the appraiser comes out and looks at the home, that they already looked at the finances, right? When you're 2 weeks away from closing, the underwriter and the bank, they should have done a lot of the due diligence already, right? They should already be in the middle of looking at your situation, your finances, in order to get you a clear to close so you can buy the home. This guy was 2 weeks away from closing on this property, and then he was notified by Navy Federal, hey, you're not going to be able to buy this home, and they denied his loan approval, right? He still was able to buy this home, but he had to go to another lender in order to get them to close on this house in 2 weeks. If you're looking to buy a home, you got to make sure that you're not just dealing with one lender. I don't care if this is the bank that you've been banking with for the last 20 years. If you're looking to buy a home, you need to be speaking to at least 3 different lenders and shopping around who can do what. Some may give you a discount in points. Some may give you a better interest rate. Some may be able to provide additional closing costs. Some lenders may be able to give you better deals on different programs that's specific to that financial institution. So the lesson in this is you got to make sure when you're dealing with the home buying process, again, I don't care how much we love Navy Federal, you want to make sure that you're talking to at least 2 additional lenders to make sure that you're keeping everybody accountable and that you're getting the best deal. Another lesson that we have to pay attention to is you need to be aware of your own credit profile. And you've heard me say this for years. You need to make sure, hey, what is my FICO score? Specifically, what is my mortgage score? You're not going to find that information from somewhere like a Credit Karma. You've got to go to myfico.com to get your mortgage scores. This is very deep, but again, all this information that is built into the story we touched on for a very long time. You got to know that. The reason why it's important is because when this gentleman wanted to buy this house, this guy right here, when he was in the home buying process and he got that denial, he realized, wait a second, my scores are in the 700s. We should know at this point that your FICO score is not the end all be all, right? Your DTI is important, how much debt that you have, the type of assets that you have, the cash reserves on hand, the amount of your deposit for the home loan, right? There's so many things that get put into the bucket to make the approval, but this guy was very savvy. He realized my credit score is good. I have very little debt. I'm pretty sure if he's doing a conventional loan, he had at least 20% down to put down. Once he got that denial, he didn't just say, oh well, I got denied. He was savvy enough to realize something's not right here. And then he went over to CFPB and he submitted a complaint to the CFPB. Whole bunch of dominoes fell, and now we have this story, and now we're highlighting this man right here. So this is another reason, guys, you got to make sure, just don't take the word from the lender. If the bank tells you something, don't just say, okay. If you get a denial on a credit card, don't just say, okay. If you get a denial from a home mortgage lender, don't just take everything at face value. If you know what your credit profile looks like, you know when somebody is trying to tell you some BS, right? This is what happened. But ultimately, he was able to close on the home, but he had to go to a different lender in the middle of the home buying process. He had to go to another lender and leave Navy Federal behind because they basically played him on this deal. Now, what's causing this disparity? Why are we seeing this across all of these financial institutions, these credit unions and these banks? What the data is showing us is even if you're having a similar applicant who's black and a similar applicant who's white and applying, the white applicant is going to have the advantage. This is not something that we're making up. This is the data that is coming out of, I believe, CFPB from 2022. And we're seeing this among all of the financial institutions. Again, Wells Fargo is not the only one doing this. Now, again, is this a credit union thing? Is this a bank thing? You guys remember we did a video on the credit union. We keep thinking that these credit unions are like the angels. We keep thinking that these credit unions are so much better than these banks. But then when we looked into the data again, we're realizing, wait a second, some of these credit unions are charging the most bank fees, the most overdraft fees, the most NSF fees. And they're using that money to do things like get naming rights on an NBA team. So what I want you guys to pay attention to is I want us to get away from this black and white thinking of how we look at banks and credit unions. These banks and these credit unions, they're not your friend. So when someone tells me, or someone got mad at me one time when I was doing a Wells Fargo video, and my advice was basically get what you can get from whatever institution that is. If Wells Fargo is able to give you a line of credit on your business, or if they're able to give you a personal loan, or if they're able to give you a credit card that's advantageous for you and your business and what you're trying to do, take advantage of it. But don't get married to that bank or that credit union. Get what you can get. use that money for whatever you're trying to use it for, and then go on to the next bank. Because at some point, we got to realize when we're looking at these numbers, there's something to it. Now, I got to say this because over the weekend, even before I went to do this video, I was seeing other content creators mention, is this the fault of other content creators that are painting Navy Federal to be like this magical place where all your dreams can be met, right? What do I mean by that? Over the last several years, we've seen a whole lot of videos on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, where content creators are saying things like, oh, here's a way to bypass Navy Federal system, apply at certain times of the day. All you got to do is, do this little sneaky trick with your credit reports and then apply at 3 a.m. You'll get an approval. You had videos from Earn Your Leisure and Him 500. They got a lot of flack because he was basically telling people to take out auto loans, but don't pay back the auto loan, and it'll be converted to a personal loan and a whole bunch of crazy stuff. And we're seeing a whole lot of videos being pushed out targeted to Blacks and Latinos, trying to circumvent the rules of the game for these banks. And now what people are theorizing is it possible that all of these content creators that are telling people, hey, get the bag by any means, lie, cheat, do whatever you got to do to get in, put whatever on your applications, just do whatever you got to do to get the bag, right? Are we seeing the culmination of years and years and years of get the bag by any means? Are we seeing the banks now putting a hard boot to that? Meaning if you have a whole bunch of people, primarily Blacks and Latinos, coming in because they saw somebody on Twitter talk about a Navy Federal hack and how you can get the bag and how you can lie on the application, do you think that the banks and the credit unions are going to allow that to continue without somehow changing how they're doing their underwriting and their approval process? That's something to think about. Now, am I saying that's the reason for the disparity? No, because I think there are still institutionalized practices that come from way before our parents were born that were put into practice that we're still seeing the effects of, right? It is what it is. The stats show it. But are we as content creators making it worse by telling folks who don't even know what's on their credit profile, can't even read their credit reports, telling them to go to these banks, telling them to create LLCs without any income with authorized users on their credit reports, and we're telling them to go to all these banks to get loans that they can't even pay back? Do we think that at some point, these banks and credit unions are going to adjust and try to prevent the scams and the get the bag mentality, right? It is what it is. I think it's a little bit of both. Are there racial disparities still going into 2024? Yes, the data supports it. The data shows it. Among the top 200 lenders, Navy Federal right now is the worst. Now, again, I don't know the specific details on this case study of this guy. The only person that's going to know that data is Navy Federal themselves, the lenders, maybe CFPB. We're not going to be privy to that information, but at the end of the day, we got to realize, number one, we have to be accountable for ourselves and our own financial situation. We have to be accountable and responsible to understand what's on my credit report. We've got to understand that these banks and these credit unions are not our friends. They're in business to make their shareholders happy. They're in business to make investments like this, getting naming rights to NBA stadiums, right? They're about their money, so you need to be about yours, right? So am I saying now we have to make sure we have to boycott Navy Federal and we have to, I'm not saying any of that. What I'm saying right now is the data is the data, and we can't bury our heads in the sands and pretend like the disparity and discrepancy between Black and white applicants are not a real thing. It is a real thing. So my advice as a content creator and someone who has done videos on Navy Federal for years, again, don't fall in love with any institution. Matter of fact, a lot of the best banks and credit unions that you can probably be with are a lot of the ones that are in your community that no one really knows about, right? I'll do a video about that later on. But at the end of the day, guys, we have to be responsible for our own financial credit profile. That way, if we go to the lenders, if we go to the home mortgage brokers, if we go to the auto dealerships, and we don't know and we don't understand fully what our credit profile is looking like, we're going to be told anything and we're going to believe it, right? So make sure you do your due diligence. Make sure that you shop around. And if anything doesn't sound right when you're talking to a banker, and this happened on more than one occasion with a few of my clients where we're trying to get business funding, a lot of these bankers, they really don't even understand a lot of the stuff that we're discussing right now, right? So you can't just depend on them. If anything sounds weird, you got to do what this guy did right here, which he went to CFPB, right? And now he's featured on CNN, and Navy Federal has just released I think a press release talking about that the numbers are skewed, they're not accurate, et cetera, et cetera. I'll put that on the screen so you guys can read it. And I'm also going to put this article in the description so you can read it yourself. But that's pretty much it. That's the gist of it. So there's a lot to unpack here. I'm probably going to do more update videos as more information comes out. As more information comes out, if I didn't touch on something in particular that you are seeing now, go down in the comment, let us know, because I think this is a learning lesson. And as we go into 2024, we can make more informed decisions as consumers and as borrowers, right? Hopefully you guys enjoyed. I'll check you out in the next video. Peace.